Hi guys, I'm Jen Gamuka. Today I'm going to be talking about my dissertation topic. What I would like to research, what I'm planning on researching, is the professionalization of childbirth, particularly in the 19th century. Now, I had planned on just looking at the South, how this professionalization, the shift to professionalization, affected that region. That region, as we know, advanced a little bit slower in terms of technology, in terms of medicine. But I'm noticing that there's a gap in the research between a comparison from North to South. There's a lot of information examining just the North. The North was making great strides in medicine. It was making great strides in producing obstetricians. Pennsylvania, that's where I'm from, is actually one of the first places to have a medical school. And within this state, they actually started bringing women in to obstetrician school because they believed that women really understood the anatomy of the female body better than men. And all the sources that I have read kind of support that because men were examining women still under that Victorian veil of modesty. So they were not getting, the full view of what was going on with women anatomy. So they brought women in to deliver babies to help along with this. So the North was advancing pretty rapidly when it came to that. Now, on the contrary, in the South, we have a different social economic system. We have slavery. We have a very large black population. And then we have kind of your very rich, very poor classes. Yes, that did exist in the North too, but I'm looking at the South specifically. The South didn't have the education that the North had. They didn't have the technology. So they had a different experience whenever it came to childbirth. And there's a lot of switching from what was called a granny midwife. This was typically a slave on the plantation who had been around and helped deliver a whole bunch of babies and was pretty good at what she did. And then all of a sudden physicians are starting to come in the latter part of the 19th century, and the physicians are noticing these granny midwives aren't trained well enough. And there was a really large field of practice, and this sounds terrible, but the slaves had very little control over their birthing conditions, over their conditions really in general. And the outlaw of slavery, the importation of slavery in 1807, that is going to affect how we maintained a slave population in the South during that time. It's going to be dependent on natural increase. So successfully having more babies into slavery was critically important for the economic system and the slave system really in general. So we are seeing a lot of physicians go into that region, and they are practicing, as terrible as that sounds, on the slave population to see, okay, well, this works, this doesn't work, this is how we can improve. Now, back to my dissertation. What I want to look at is I want to look at really a comparison between the North and the South, and then also between Black versus white women in both regions. You saw the problems with the Southern Black population. They're practicing delivering children, and they're being used as practice. In the North, doctors were a little bit better. We had hospitals, laying in hospitals, so we had the ability to treat people. But it was almost a death sentence whenever you went into one of these hospitals. They didn't understand how germs were being carried from one place to another. Perpetual fever was a really big issue. The doctor would go and do an autopsy and then come deliver a baby. Woman would die of sepsis, die of infection. They couldn't figure out the relationship. So these poor classes of women in the North typically are minorities. They are also being used as test dummies in some way. So I want to do kind of a comparison between them. My methodology, I want to find a few, and I found a few. I need to find a little bit more doctors' notes as well as patient notes to compare the two. In the South, it's easier. A lot of these plantation owners, they actually created crude how-to manuals on delivering babies, and they would jot things down in notes of books. on contrary, in the North, the doctors, they weren't experimenting in quite the same way. It was just a little bit different. So I want to look at things like social influence. I want to look at economic influence. That's going to be a big one. And then I also want to look at education. Did education play a role in better medicine, or was the fact that the South using hands-on education going to actually turn out to be better during this time period? I have looked at a whole bunch of different sources, historiographies. One of my favorite ones is by Megan Davis, and she goes through and she examines so many of the different sources, and there are a ton of sources on this. Most of those sources, just to kind of give you a summary of them, indicate that women did have a big control in childbirth. They got to pick who was there. Now, typically, the physicians were men when they picked them. And then if they picked to have a granny midwife, the husband's influence pushed them towards having physicians. So it was kind of a battle of gender and a battle of control. So it's kind of a very neat topic to look at. There are some big gaps in the historiography on this topic. And one of those big gaps is the women physicians. Like I told you, there were women being pulled into the schools in Pennsylvania to get them involved in this field, but then we're not seeing a whole lot of research done on these women physicians, and I'm certain that they wrote their experiences. So my goal is to, do a comparison of region, comparison of gender between patroon, physician, birth attendant, or granny midwife, whatever you want to call them, and then region. So as of right now, that might be a very large chunk, but that's what I'm exploring, and I'm hoping to narrow it down a little bit from there. So I hope you guys enjoyed listening to me talk about my topic. I wish I had more than 7 minutes to discuss it. It's a really, really fun topic. If you guys want to read some really good works, Birthing a Slave is absolutely fabulous book. It will give you nightmares. I mean, it is excellent. So thank you guys, and I look forward to working with you.